I thought it would be worth talking about the difference in response that Keir Starmer has had to the latest riots because of the Southport stabbings and the response he had to the Black Lives Matter riots. Because I think that these are not necessarily parallel, but you can definitely argue it that from their perspective, they believe that George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, and therefore these international riots have happened. So the Black Lives Matter protesters in Britain feel as strongly connected to George Floyd, apparently, as the people in the Northwest have when they feel as strongly connected to him as they did to the children who were stabbed in Southport. Now, whether you believe that or not, okay, different question. But the response has been just remarkable. So Keir Starmer recently went to Northern Ireland because there was riots there, and he decided he was just going to condemn the people of Northern Ireland for being bothered by this. Let's watch.
I'm in Northern Ireland here today for three purposes. Firstly, to meet the PSNI officers who've been on the front line during this disorder. Many of them have been injured. And my purpose was to say to them, thank you for what they have done. We make big asks of them, they step up, and they deserve our thanks. I've also had the chance to speak to the PSNI senior leadership about the challenges that they face and the support that they need. And then third, and very importantly, to speak to some of the communities most impacted about the fear that they have, the anxiety that they have about the recent disorder. The disorder is intolerable, it is incapable of justification, it's clearly racist, and it does not represent the modern, forward-looking Northern Ireland that I know that this place is.
Right, so, intolerable, unjustifiable, and racist.
Specifically non-representative I found very interesting, because they're trying to refashion Britain as an ideological project in the mould of British values, which just means liberal, pluralistic, multicultural, in the same way that in the 60s, JFK and the ADL attempted to do with America, with it's a nation of ideas, it's a nation of immigrants.
We can go back to Lincoln with that. They're a propositional nation.
Yes, I mean, the nation of immigrants idea was literally the book title in the 60s, but that's when
the notion of it being a propositional nation comes from Lincoln.
Yes.
But anyway, so this is probably not true. Because I don't think that he believes that. Because, of course, we have a similar event that was in 2020. There was massive riots across Britain, and 27 police officers were injured, which is a lot. And, well, Keir Starmer didn't have the same response. Just to be clear, I mean, this was quite shocking for the people watching it. When we were watching it, when we covered all of this, we were like, oh my God, who knew that this was going to erupt out? So we were sort of on the other side of what they're on the other side of now, because they're like watching the riots from their perspective, saying, oh my God, I didn't think this was going to come up. So everyone was surprised that these deep wells of feeling exist in the country from what are essentially siloed communities that don't really have much interaction with one another. And so the response is so different. Instead of the authorities and the media, the government saying, well, there's no legitimacy to any of this, we're going to hunt you down, I'm deeply saddened by and depressed that a minority of protesters became violent towards police officers in central London, said Cressida Dick. Not the we're going to get you from, what's his name, Mark Rowley. The majority of Sunday's protests were peaceful, but in the evening there were disturbances outside of Downing Street. Right, okay, so mostly peaceful protests. Right. Again, the complete tonal shift and difference between how we've had.
I happen to remember cops, again, physically running away down Whitehall.
Yeah.
On that one, again.
And after that, the Met came out and instructed their police officers that they were at liberty to take the knee if they would so wish.
Get to that. Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, said, well, the violence is not acceptable, but I stand with you and share your anger and pain.
Sure.
Direct quote.
Because George Floyd took a belly full of fentanyl.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. But eight girls getting stabbed, he didn't say that, right? So it's just very interesting. This vital cause was badly let down by a tiny minority who turned violent. Again, the same thing could be said about the Southport riots. Exactly the same thing could be said, but it's not being said, and the question is why. I mean, for this one, in the London one, 135 arrests were made, and like I said, 27 police officers were injured. But how many people were prosecuted? I mean, Priti Patel, who is, of course, the Home Secretary at the time, said peaceful protests were fine, but a lawless minority of protesters turned to violence. The thugs and criminals responsible are ready to be brought to justice, she tells MP, and that justice will follow. Okay, well, how many were prosecuted then?
She was really busy at the time letting millions of new migrants in, so she just couldn't get around to it.
She was.
Yeah.
So I looked into this. I did a lot of Googling. I decided to, do various sort of time slices to try and find any prosecutions. I tweeted out, has anyone been prosecuted from this? And this is what I found. So the first thing that came up was the fact that in Northern Ireland, none of them were going to be prosecuted. Like, they literally just said, 14 suspects from the rioting, from the Black Lives Matter protest, but we've decided not to prosecute. I'm going to do it, bro. It's our choice. We're at luxury to do it. We're not going to do it. The kid who set fire to the cenotaph, 19-year-old chappie, who failed.
Astrafel Sang.
Yeah, who failed to set fire to the cenotaph, because I guess they must have prepared in advance for this sort of thing, because these are fire-resistant flags. He was supposed to face up to 18 months behind bars, but the judge decided to give him a 2-year conditional discharge and ordered him to pay £340 in court costs. So, I guess not a big deal.
Like, how is that not a fifth columnist?
Well, he's 19, so... and
No excuse. He's an adult man.
Sure, but,
Yeah, I didn't need to set fire to the cenotaph when I was 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's the way they're looking at it.
But, like, people say, oh, it's sometimes I say fifth columnist on Twitter. Some people say, commies, usually say things like, that's ridiculous, that's hyperbole, that you've gone way too far with that. But it's not, it's literally exactly what it is.
I mean,
if some black guy OD'd in America, and then you use that as an example to riot and set fire to a flag at the cenotaph, anyone who might not know, a memorial to our war dead. I think it speaks... What is that then?
I think... I don't know if I'd call him a fifth columnist, because I think that ascribes to him far more intellect and agency than of which he's capable. But what I think this represents is the total failure of the ability of the state to bring these people onto the narrative of why being British is a good thing. Right? If you're some 19-year-old kid...
Definitely that.
So, yeah, exactly. If you're some 19-year-old kid, you feel you're trapped in Britain and the British state is evil and doesn't represent you, and the fact that the society that represents is worthy of being burned down, which you would symbolically do by burning down the flag, that's a massive failure that we should be talking about. But instead, we're just going to let him off. We're not going to punish him. We're not going to show him that there's a hard border on that, right? You have to change your ways on that. No. He's just going to get through.
I would say we've failed nothing. His character has failed.
Sure, but again, he's 19. I mean, look at him. Like, he doesn't look like he's...
The following year, they were trying children who put up some...
I'm not saying they were.
Very edgy posts about black footballers on the England team for missing penalties at the Euros. They were trying them as adults.
I'm not saying they weren't, but what I'm saying is I think you're ascribing too much intellect and agency to this individual. Right.
You're responsible for your own actions.
I agree.
Got to be.
I agree, and he should have been punished, right? He should have been punished. But like the wider meta-analysis, I think would be way beyond this person. But anyway, the point is he was let off, basically. £340 fine, that's it. Don't worry about it. It's only the war dead. It's only the British flag. You're only setting fire to it. And then you got the Colston statue. There was, of course, a massive amount of disorder in Bristol, where they rolled the statue of Edward Colston into the canal. This was, of course, criminal damage, and 4 people were let off from this. They were just acquitted.
They were rewarded with this as well because they replaced the Coulson statue with a BLM activist with their fist in the air.
Yes. The 4 defendants wore T-shirts designed by Banksy. Quote, "This is a victory for Bristol. This is a victory for racial equality, and it's a victory for anyone who wants to be on the right side of history." Thanks, Banksy.
Yeah.
Regime-approved dissident.
So obnoxious.
And they get let off.
So obnoxious.
The criminal damage they committed doesn't matter. They just got let off.
I love how at least the Coulson statue was fished out.
Yeah, and put in a museum or something.
Yeah.
The graffiti in that wasn't cleaned off, though.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I don't really care about Edward Colston. He's not a great hero of mine, but like the fact that they have just got away with just arbitrary criminal damage that was done during a riot is what absolutely infuriates me. And then they
But
get
sick of it gets 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was encouraging people to go riot, so I can understand why they came down on him. That was a silly thing to do. But why is there this two-tier standard? I find it insufferable. It's like, literally like nails on a chalkboard to me. It's just driving me mad.
Yeah.
But they get to parade around and parrot, the regime supports us. We were let off because we're on the right side of history. So we're leaning into the warm embrace of the power structure, and you can feel who's on the outside and gets the cold face of it. And so I kept looking. So in Newcastle, 2 years later, 18 protesters were jailed for violent disorder. So they didn't break out the 24-hour policing. Could have put you through the
Not necessary.
2 years later, what happened is the Newcastle police just decided for years to trawl through this footage. Because counter-protesters came out.
All right.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know the names of the people who went to jail? Craig Hornsby, Christopher Bone, Neil Drummond, Ryan Barlow. Oh, all these Black Lives Matter. No. These were the English counter-protesters who came out. They're the ones who got jailed in the Black Lives Matter protests, in the Black Lives Matter riots, right? Michael O'Brien, Richard Short, Wendy Robinson, Jay Plunkett, Elliot Wright. And I'm sure they all did something. Right, I'm sure, they threw bottles at the cops or something like that, but so did the bloody Black Lives Matter protesters on the other side, and the only one, Usman Ogiden. He's the only one, right? So this guy in the middle, he's the only Black Lives Matter protester from this who got arrested. He was 22 years old and he went to take a bottle from someone else and threw it at the counter-protesters. So he actually got arrested and got 20 months in jail or something like that, right? And there was one other that I could find, some alcoholic lunatic from South Africa, right? James Michael, Meikle, 39, was filmed laughing following an unprovoked attack on emergency workers. For some reason, there's emergency workers, they're not even police, but he starts attacking them because he's drunk, and he has British and South African passports. Lives in North Devon to attempt to overcome problems with alcohol and drug abuse.
Right, we can just revoke one of those then.
You would think. And he was supposed to go back to South Africa that day, but he decided to attend the protest instead because he discovered he could not buy alcohol at the airport.
Literally on the day of
on the day of his flight. Couldn't buy alcohol at the airport. So he went to central London to begin drinking. For some reason got caught up in Black Lives Matter protest and decided to start assaulting emergency workers. And so he got 6 months in prison.
Was he then deported after that?
Not as far as I'm aware. But you assault 2 emergency workers, 6 months in prison. You yell racist slogans at a police dog, 20 months in prison.
You're a 50-year-old woman with caring duties who puts an ill-advised Facebook post up about 2 years?
Yeah.
Well, if that guy we covered, he didn't do anything. He just walked towards the police line.
Really?
Remember that? We covered it.
There have been loads. But and there was one other BLM organiser that went to jail for fraud, not because they were involved in riots. She
That's what BLM was, a giant fraud.
Well, yeah, 100%. 100% a giant fraud. She had just stolen money from the Edward Colston statue fundraiser. Yeah, exactly. The
recognisable
Zara Salim. And according to Robert Buckland, this could have been fast-tracked. Conservatives could have done precisely what the Labour Party are doing, because of course all of this legislation was in place. And you may remember Keir Starmer saying, look, we're not going to come out and introduce a bunch of new legislation, we're just going to use the powers that we have. And he did. The Conservatives could have done all of this against their ideological enemies, but they didn't. They didn't do any of it. They didn't come out and make sure that all of these people, again, 27 police officers injured.
That's because they weren't their ideological enemies.
Exactly.
You're saying Robert Buckland was sort of slow off the mark.
The former South Swindon MP, yes.
The head of the One Nation Conservatives.
And so this was the parallels here, right? I think there are parallels here. It's the same institutions, it's the same sort of problems, it's the same response that could have been had but wasn't. Instead, it was massaged by the media, by the politicians, by the legal system. Two people got light sentences for this, even though, again, nearly 30 police officers wounded, right? So Keir Starmer's response was, of course, the iconic taking the knee. Now, his response to the Southport rioters was, your concerns aren't legitimate and I'm going to jail you.
Wasn't going to regret doing it.
His exact words. I promise you, you will regret doing this. As if there's a person in this country, I saw the secret barrister, the shitlib barrister. Come on, well, there's no two-tier policing. Just don't even try it. Don't even try it. It's so self-evident. It's so on the face.
The serious look on his face, very seriously taking the knee.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, this was the first thing he did. Like, you can see the date. The first thing he did, and then he rushed to get this video out. And I thought we'd just watch this video. Just think about the tone of the first one, where he's like, "Nope, you're racist, and we're not having it. It was indefensible, cannot be justified." Got the volume on this one.
There it is.
Floyd, and the response of President Trump and the US authorities to the peaceful protests, to people rightly demanding justice, has been an affront to humanity. The last week has shone a spotlight on the racism, discrimination, and injustice experienced by those from black and minority ethnic communities in the US, in the UK, and across the world. Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." That's why today I've written to the Prime Minister asking for his assurance that the British government is doing all that it can to urge President Trump to respect human rights.
None of the opposition did anything like this.
Trump did nothing. He didn't send in the National Guard.
But let's assume that Trump was an inveterate opponent of Black Lives Matter in the same way that he's an inveterate opponent of the English community in the Southport riots, right? Whereas our opposition saying, well, look, I'm going to write to you and say you've got to guarantee that the human rights of the rioters or whatever it is going to be protected, that the English community will be protected from stabbings, but there is no one on the other side of this. Elon Musk was the only person doing anything about this. But I want to watch the rest of this.
Like the bit that's actually on screen right now. Where's Nigel and Tice?
Yeah.
Say, banging the drum for our fundamental democratic right to peaceful protest.
I mean, Tice has actually been a lot stronger on this than Nigel has, and, fair enough, I'm happy to take back the accusations of weakness from Tice. If he's going to come out strong on something, I'm happy to do that. But we've had very little in the way of actual representation on this. But I want to watch the rest of this. For some reason, the sound's gone off again.
Has called on the UK government to ensure that our exports are not being used in the suppression of democratic rights in the US. But we must also reflect on the injustices in our own country.
Why?
We must address the reality and the impact of anti-black racism, which has been highlighted by the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, more than ever, it's incumbent upon us all to ensure that this is a turning point.
Daily stabbings in the UK.
Well, I like how he's saying we need to ensure our exports are not being used to crush human rights, like their arms sales to the Congo. I mean,
yeah. The BAE system missiles that were built in England don't get used against black rioters in Los Angeles or something. Well, just nonsense, isn't it?
Let's assume that the argument they're making is entirely just, right? Okay, racism killed George Floyd, right? Oh yeah, we need to think about racism. Okay, stabbings killed the Southport girls. And there have been stabbings every single day since then. We're not reflecting on the condition of our country because no. This is just an acceptable part of diversity.
When the second reporter at his press conference teed him up with a very easy get out of jail free card by saying, "Is there not some sort of legitimate grievance that is here from the peaceful protesters?" Do you remember what he said twice?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That is what he believes. He believes that the 3 dead girls and all the other injured do not matter. But he believes that George Floyd, the narrative confected around this, takes precedent so much that the British government must intervene in American affairs.
Justifies the riots. That's the point. There's no justification. There's no excusing it, apart from when it's happening to black people that Keir Starmer feels that he's the defender of. For some reason.
Yeah, the faux seriousness again. It was all very, very serious.
It's the application of grace, right, that I'm really concerned about. There is no grace given to the English community. You've just had a bunch of your daughters murdered, right? Every single day,
Doesn't matter.
English people are being stabbed by diversity. That's literally a news item every single day. A man has done something. Oh, good, another one. You know, doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter.
Just suck it up, gammon.
Exactly. Whereas something's happened in America. Oh, come here, black community. I'll cuddle you to my bosom and make sure that your concerns are taken care of. And it's just like, I'm so...
Yeah, the double standard is actually sickening.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Makes me feel nauseous.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And so, yes, as you can see, Keir Starmer could not have been more overflowing with sympathy, with empathy, with concern for the rioters themselves, right? And this, again, police who want to take the knee during the BLM protests, I think it's a very good thing, quote unquote. Just no, like, it's not justified, it's not this, it's not that. No, I think it's a good thing. And when he came out and he was like, oh, I called Black Lives Matter a moment rather than a movement. I'm really sorry. He took a lot of flack for this.
No, that's fair. It does happen every 4 years, so it's not just the one.
It happens every electoral cycle. But he came out and said, well, what we're going to do then is call for action, not words. And so he's got like 4 targets in law, like we're going to challenge the ethnicity pay gap, blah, 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 right? And he went on and he willingly took unconscious bias training and imposed it on the Labour Party as well, because he was like, yeah, I didn't mean to call it a moment, I meant to call it a movement. And he says, for all of our staff, I'm going to lead from the top on this and do that training first. I think everyone should have unconscious bias training. I think it's important. There's always the risk of unconscious bias, and just saying, oh, well, it probably applies to other people, not me, is not the right thing to do. So he could not have been more supplicant about this. He couldn't have been more pliant.
I was going to write a character, and I was going to make them comically a moral coward.
Yes.
That's what I would write, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally salaaming before these people and saying, just lash me if you need to. Yeah. Right? I'll go through everything willingly, and I'll impose it on the rest of my party. And everything you've done is just and right. And, we don't like the violence against the police, but I'm totally standing with you in every way. Whereas for the English rioters, you are getting the full force of the law. The boot is stamping down as hard as it can. And I am not in any way sympathetic to your pain.
Your pain does not matter, and you will regret anything you do.
Yeah. His literal words. Hi folks, thanks for watching. If you appreciate what we do and you'd like to help us continue doing it, as we are of course demonetized by the gods of YouTube, go over to lotus.com, spend £5 a month, sign up, support us, and go and watch our England Riots Roundtable, where we give our expert analysis as to why the recent riots in England happened. And of course, go over to x.com, formerly known as Twitter, and follow us at lotuseaters_com.